This episode of the Psych to Practice podcast is sponsored by PAR, where psychological assessments meet innovation.
PAR has been the gold standard in the industry for over 45 years and has empowered professionals in education, healthcare, private practice, and research with trusted tools and cutting-edge solutions.
Discover more at parinc.com. Again, that is parinc.com. Creating connections, changing lives. Hello and welcome to the Psych to Practice podcast, your one stop for practical and useful clinical information, masterful insights from experts in the field, and a guide to daily living. I'm your host, Paul Wagner, and joining me is
Ray Christner.
A bit of a topical episode as we're fast approaching the holiday season. I think Thanksgiving is right around the corner. I'm wanting to do an episode on gratitude, and it's not a new topic for us, but maybe a new take on an old topic for us here.
Yeah, it is that time of year, right? We have, holidays coming. So, all of a sudden this high expectations, emotional complexity that we have. And then I think, all of us at this time of year, I guess we start this idea of end of the year reflection, right? And it's I think the timing is good. And I think, trying to maybe do a new take on gratitude. As you and I have been kind of discussing this, it's kind of shifted my thinking into how we might advance the topic a little bit.
Yeah. I think when we're talking about trying to take gratitude and take it a little bit further, there's a topic that you mentioned, a while ago. And I think it was your experiences going to live sporting events. And, I think you shared that typically when you're walking out, maybe your team didn't win when it feels like you're going to live events, right. and the different experience you can have versus those around you. And that comment has always kind of stuck with me, and how we can almost have these different types of gratitude. I think there can be very almost performative gratitude acts. And I think certainly we can look to social media and we see so many different kind of responses that are intended to be observed and experienced from this outside in view rather than a really kind of internally driven sense of gratitude, like our own experience. And we can post it on social media. So, if you're an individual, if you're posting, that's not the intent to call that out there. But when it's being done for clicks or likes versus when we have an experience that just feels so impactful and meaningful that we have to share it, I think we can kind of see the difference in that. And, when people are sharing that, wanting to talk about what elevates that experience versus just being able to share, I'm so grateful for fill in the blank and all that fill in the blank has done for me. And, I will always cherish what, how fill in the blank, like it's not copy paste in a way.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I find myself as I, am kind of toward the tail end of doing a lot of traveling and speaking, and afterwards, going on social media and being like, I'm grateful for so-and-so having me to speak at this event or whatever. And I think that it's interesting because it's genuine in the sense of, yes, I absolutely appreciate the fact that these things happen and there is that, but it's very momentary gratitude, it's like this really, I don't want to say quick and fleeting, but it is. It's, this happened and I'm grateful it happened. And I think that, what's interesting from the discussions you and I have had is it's getting me to start thinking about gratitude as a trait, gratitude as a stable tendency, or, a lifestyle component, whatever we want to call it, where it's not just about the momentary gratitude. Like those are still there. We're always going to have that. Somebody does something nice for me, I'm going to have hopefully some gratitude back to them.
Yes.
But how, I think you used the word internal, which I think is important. How do we internalize that? How do we make gratitude a stable part of our being where it's a deeper aspect to gratitude, where then when things aren't going well, we still have this foundational piece that we can build upon. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where my head's kind of at with this.
It absolutely does. And I think, I don't know that it always has to start externally as an experience, but I think it's not an uncommon starting point. But
sure,
when we take it to that further place, I think it internally connects with our values, with our morals. And like in that way, we can see and experience it a little bit deeper, a little bit more intensely, versus just keeping it like, I appreciate this action here. It is more of a, wow, I got to have this experience. Like, right. This is going to alter things for me, or this is going to be something that sticks for me. In those days that are challenging, I'm going to think back like, I had that, like, that was such a cool moment. So like what gives it that staying power, I think, is when it connects to those values and morals, or at least that's one avenue of it to connect.
Yeah. And, you'd said something when we were kind of prepping, and I think it's maybe important for us to draw out here is, you mentioned this idea of kind of goal and versus intention. And yes. I think like, let's maybe hone in there for a second. Cause I thought when you said that, I was like, wow, what a great way to look at it. So I'm going to let you kind of start that piece of it. How do you see it?
And so, I love goals. I think goals are really important. However, I think we can really get so much more out of goals when we're able to align them or connect them with intentions. And we have to do it genuinely. Like, we can't force it. But, I've been having conversations more so recently, and there was an individual I was talking with, and we were talking about some of the things that she's looking to accomplish and do. And there was this like end point. It was like, this is it. I'm doing it for this point or for this reason. And so it was a fitness oriented goal. And so it was like, I'm looking to do this. And I was like, okay, like, well, let's get into the why. Like, why is that meaningful? Why is that valuable? Why is that worth investing in? And just like this, like, I kind of brought a tear to my eye. Like, she's like, I want to have this experience with my children where when we're going to an amusement park, I want to be able to actually go on the rides with them, because right now the rides don't feel very comfortable for me. And I want to get to a point where when I'm there, I get to experience this. So she's pulling on this value and more like quality family time of creating memories and experiences with her children. And that, I think, is going to have so much more staying power than a number on a scale.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's kind of this idea of intention. It creates almost that, when things are challenging, or when we start to feel disheartened, it can really, I think, be a source of motivation for us, or a source of grit and determination, depending on the context, and gives our goals a bit more staying power, and helps see through that intent.
And now a word from our sponsor. PAR's AI Report Writer is an AI-boosted tool that generates comprehensive reports, including interpretations and recommendations based on scores from a wide range of popular assessment tools. Spend less time on report writing and more time supporting students. Learn more at parinc.com/AI. That is parinc.com/AI. And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, and I like that, and I think with that, I mean, there's a few things that kind of came to mind. I mean, I think just even the idea of, and I'm going to pull it back to just the idea of gratitude as part of what we do with people. I mean, I think a lot of times when we're working with people about gratitude, we do stay very goal oriented. So it's like things like, write 3 gratitude letters every month to someone. Like it's a goal, like we put it on there, but it's a very external kind of future oriented, this measurable, we're going to hit a number of tasks. so there's this outcome. And I think when you're talking about intention with it, I think, and I think it brings gratitude in a different way. But if we're looking at gratitude from, instead of a goal, an intention, that we're working with people to help them internalize it.
Yeah.
To be really present oriented, having values, being value anchored, I guess. And it's really it's the focus on the process, not the outcome. So like the example you gave, it's not about what your weight is on a scale. It is about the experience and the process of experiencing things with your kids. And so like when I think of like, again, tying it to the gratitude idea of writing 3 gratitude letters is very goal oriented. But if we work with people to have some intention as they move through like the holiday season, where they're really being aware of people who supported them throughout this year, and that kind of an intentional piece of it, I think it just changes it. It's not measurable, but I think it's very profoundly regulating, right? Like this idea of it really just kind of, again, it gives us this foundation, I think, that's really important.
And I think it helps drawing out appreciation throughout the process versus just towards the end. And so the experience of working towards this, it feels like I am investing in, I love that idea, like the letters just being a letter versus the letters being, how do I connect and really just put down into words what this person has done and what it means to me in a way that they are going to hear it and know without a shadow of a doubt what their efforts have done.
Yeah.
Like that, like as we're going through writing each word, and maybe even as like, we go through different iterations, like, if we get 90%, like, no, that's just not the right tone. Starting over can feel like it's valuable. It feels like, it's worth investing in versus just like, I got to start over. Like, oh my God. Like, it's not just like performative in that sense. It's not just a task or just something we're looking like, an expectation we're looking to hit. It's the experience of the action itself, I think. And I think that allows us to elicit a far greater sense of gratitude throughout the entirety of the process.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think this idea that, we oftentimes treat gratitude as a task rather than that process, and it's interesting because I think when we do that, you use the word performative, which I think is really, it's what it becomes. It's just this performative act. But I think when we do that, I think that the difficulty with that is we set ourselves up for self-criticism when it's not completed. Like when we send 2 of the 3, we somehow failed, versus the fact they could have been really 2 incredible letters that we wrote for people, but it would minimize based on the task, right? Like we missed the stance part of it. And I think when we do that, and I think with gratitude especially, much of I think what we do in therapy, if we kind of put this in the therapy room, is we give tasks that feel disconnected from the meaning. Like, again, it's this, well, if you write 3 things that you're grateful for every night, that's somehow gratitude. And without the reflection part of it, we're missing that meaning behind it. And it's, maybe that's getting way too deep, but I think, as I'm kind of approaching like the holidays and things this year, it really is a mind shift for me of kind of going, what Thanksgiving's coming up, or I guess this will probably come out after Thanksgiving, that we'll this episode may come out. But with that, like, I'm going in it, like, there could be the task of being grateful to spend time with my family in Thanksgiving. And then there could be the process of spending time with my family. And it's like, for me right now, I'm trying to like kind of go, how do I stay present in that experience and that process that makes it different from just checking the box that I went to dinner and we did these things. And this is a very different way to look at it.
Yeah. And, you use the word experience there. And I want to throw it back out and just in a slightly different context of beyond that, also getting to experience that moment and the presence and awareness of I get to experience this time with my family doing this, this activity. And so I think, in some ways it can feel like we're really, downplaying some of the significance of the tasks. But I think it's in the framing. And I think we can get so caught up in the action that, we lose sight of the why and overall, like how they're experiencing these moments and or how they're experiencing these tasks and what makes it meaningful and significant. And, in fact, I guess a personal example here, earlier today, I gave my very first presentation and I was really nervous, really kind of a little jittery for it ahead of time. And out of the blue, my mother texted me and she's just like, oh, hey, I drove by your office and I didn't see your car. What you doing okay? And so I was just filling her in on a little bit of the details. And even before, she was just kind of sharing a sense of hey, good luck. And then afterward, there was a text message that was there on my phone that said, tell me all about how it went. And and then I got to share this experience and it was just a short response. She got to share, I'm really proud of you. Yeah. And wow, that was just about the deal. It was just and my mother has told me she's proud of me before. That is not a, not a foreign concept, but it was just, again, being able to experience that and even just through a text message. So, I don't think it needs to be these big grandiose actions. It can be how we pause and experience these moments and drawing out the significance of it. And I think that is how we elicit gratitude in this way versus it being an external gratitude. It's our own experience of that gratitude. And when we blend both, I think it just has, again, such a different experience.
Yeah, no. And I think that's a great example. I mean, as you and I were, talking about your presentation today, I think that's one of the things I noticed, when you talked about afterward, it was this moment, right, of just reflecting for even a brief period of time of that experience and appreciating that experience. And I think that's, I don't know that we do that enough. It's interesting. I said kind of earlier, I've been traveling and speaking frequently lately, and it's interesting because I go into those with a goal, right? There's a goal of speaking where, I want to accomplish certain things when we're there. And I think early in my career, when I presented, it was a very goal-oriented experience. It was, I'm going to check the box. I want to get certain ratings, whatever it might be. And, it's as I've matured as a presenter and I think just personally over time, my now approach to presenting is that my goal with intention, we kind of stay on that piece, is that I want to make sure that I notice moments of connection with the audience. I want to notice warmth or support maybe that come up within my presentations. So, I now less focus on what the ratings are going to be or how much content I'm going to get. And it's much more now this connection of people who maybe have a moment in that presentation where maybe I said something that reinforced that they were doing, for lack of a better word, the right process. And they were like, oh, he just, confirmed what I'm doing is kind of the right way to go about this or whatever it may be. And that's what I look for now. And it's interesting. Presenting has never been more fun than it is now for me, because now it's not about getting, and in fact, I was so impressed with you going through all your slides and not running out of time. I'm at a part now where it's like, because I've changed from I'm going to get through 83 slides in this presentation to I want to be present with the people who are there. And it's changed the way I view it. I mean, it's just such a simple thing. And it is a gratitude for me. Like, I leave feeling different. So yeah, it's, I think we can apply this in so many different ways.
Yeah. And, I think in an earlier episode, I mentioned this, but kind of piggybacking maybe a little bit off of what the topic of my presentation was as well. And this isn't only applicable towards individuals with ADHD, but that was just kind of the nature of this presentation here. The overall focus was, how do we develop more so external systems, trying to create, easier processes for individuals with ADHD for follow through. And on the surface, that is a very just goal-oriented task, like specific action-oriented. But I think in my experience with talking with clients with ADHD, with kind of building into this and like having conversations and exploring with them what it looks like, it really is more so about like, how are they able to accomplish and experience success in a different way, or challenge perceptions or belief systems about themselves and feel like, oh, I thought I was dumb. I thought I was lazy. I thought I was, careless or, heartless. Cause that's what I hear from everyone else. But if I can adapt and use some of this, like, look what I can do, look what I can accomplish. And so like, again, like their own experience, like, how do I shift this way of me viewing myself, and also shifting this, like the idea of like, I'm not trying hard enough. And like, I think I said that like 4 or 5 times in this, it's not about how hard they're trying, or like, they just need to have more willpower. It's like, hey, how do we take feedback? So if I did something and it didn't work, that's a good thing. Like that, I want to welcome that in and be like, all right, thank goodness now I know that this does not work. So that way I can adapt it, and I'm not then trying to invest more and more and more time into something that's not going to be effective. And so it can be very performative if we allow it to be, but I think we can also have it be more deep, a deeper, more meaningful experience as well. So, and that's, very, quite literally that I was talking about automation. So I don't know that you can get, as any more detached away from the experience of gratitude than something that is automated. And yet through the lens and through the intention behind it, we can work to create connection with it. We can create and elicit, those value driven moments for themselves of like, I want to feel like I'm showing up to work on time. I want to be confident with it. And I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to, I want to show up for those people that are showing up for me.
Yeah.
So how do we help you get to that? So it's like that kind of approach there versus, okay, set your timer, set your alarm for this, and then you're going to do this. And then you're like, we need to blend both.
It's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking some of the kind of questions that I find myself asking people in either evaluations or counseling sessions. I oftentimes ask questions like, when we're talking about our between session work in therapy, it's easy to get tied up on the goal, right? Did you do all of these things? And so for me, I've had this kind of shift over the years where, I might ask questions like, what's one thing that made today slightly more manageable for you? Really focusing in that kind of small detail, or, who was someone that helped shape this week for you, whether directly or indirectly? Like, who's someone that you kind of appreciated was a support for you to be successful in that goal? Or even just, even something as simple as saying, what's one part of yourself that you're grateful for today, like at this moment? And it's interesting because I find that the answers to those questions aren't very complex. It's usually this really little thing. And when you're talking about kind of what you talked about at your presentation and like the like the automating aspect of it. Yeah, sometimes that's the part of ourselves that we appreciate, that we had that automation, that we had those things, because when shit gets tough, that's the time when you need automation, right? We need it to be, we need that to happen, and it's, so yeah, I mean, I think it's just a great way to reframe sometimes for people, because we are trying to get all these tasks done in therapy, and we're trying to do, but sometimes we miss those little pieces that are so important.
Yeah. And, interestingly, like I was thinking about, the role of gratitude or thankfulness and coming up in sessions. And every once in a while, I'll just kind of, throw some things out there just to like kind of, I guess, test the waters and where things are at. And I found myself hesitating a little bit more so. And, for a variety of reasons. But, I think, things have been challenging, by and large. And, we've talked about quite a few of those different challenges. And it's not about, what political party you align with or, what's going on. It's just like, there's a lot of division. There's a lot of disconnect. And like the holiday time, I think exemplifies that at times, where it can add pressure or challenges. And so it almost felt like, is thankfulness or gratitude something to be bringing up? And then like when I had that thought, it was almost like, well, if that's the thought, we need, like, that's the signal to myself, like, we need to be talking more about this. And then again, bringing this up and one thing I wanted to kind of share there is like, when we're talking about this, it isn't only ever, looking at the positive or like looking at like, like the warm and fuzzy. I think when we're really practicing gratitude, we're being real with ourselves, but we're being real in a way that doesn't dismiss or discredit those positive feelings or those experiences that have meaning and value. And we're not saying like, oh yeah, but I probably shouldn't let myself feel that because of, A, B, C, D. Like one doesn't have to erase or discredit the other. And I think that's another really important piece of, we can share and talk about this without this like fear or worry that, oh, hey, if I'm talking to someone who is, maybe really experiencing some financial hardship right now, and we're talking about gratitude, like that might feel like it's a really, out of place conversation, and yet something that I think can be practiced and really can have a lot of meaning and value to share and go through. So, I don't think it's only uses when either, we're doing it performatively or when we're doing it in relation to like, an event or experience, or even to the holiday and like a season. I think we can also use gratitude as a way of saying like, how do we make something a bit more real or a bit more human? Because we're complex. We have, there's a duality. So if I'm experiencing something frustrating, then what's the positive? What's the silver lining? How can I work to experience a bit of both? And I think that's another aspect of gratitude that we can bring into the therapy office as well. And having maybe some hard conversations about a topic that might sound kind of easy or might kind of sound simple here.
Right. I think it's when we need it the most.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when it's, it really shouldn't be a strategy when things are going well. It really is something that we should be focusing on. Again, it's back to that value focus, right? That stability, that tendency. But, I think this is where the idea of gratitude gets a bad rap. And I think I blame us in the mental health profession for doing just what you said. Like we almost create this toxic positivity that it's like, oh, you just got to be grateful and think about things. And it isn't. Like gratitude isn't always easy. In fact, it's sometimes really tough to find something little in life that we hang our hat on for a moment and we're grateful, whether it's, trauma histories that people have that make gratitude difficult or expressing gratitude difficult. During the holidays, there's grief that people feel. Yeah, money's tight right now for everyone. I mean, this week I've had several people I've talked to about, they don't have money to buy gifts. And they're trying to figure out that for themselves. And they're lonely and there's pressure, all of these things. And we have to create it in a balance. I mean, I love that you brought that up, because I think sometimes we even therapeutically make it this goal-oriented thing that we just like, oh, you just think positive thoughts, or and it's no, I think gratitude is about reality. It's about struggling, but also being grateful. You know, I had somebody, not around this, it wasn't anything to do with the holidays, but I was just talking to somebody who is going through some pretty complex grief at the moment, and a lot of difficulties that have happened, and it was interesting because it was kind of this reframe of that they had. And I don't think they were trying to reframe it, but they were kind of just saying, like, you know, gosh, I'm going through like missing, you know, one of my parents, struggling with another one of my parents, having a hard time with my job, disconnecting with some friends. But then in that kind of went, but you know, I'm just so grateful, like, that my kids texted me in the morning, and like that ding that I knew it was them, or I think maybe it was even Snapchat. I don't even think it was a text. They Snapchatted me, and there was a second that meant so much to me, and all the other weight that was on me for that second lifted. And I'm so grateful that I have that relationship. I think that's kind of what you said. I think that brings that to life. Like, yeah, like that doesn't mean that she's doing cartwheels over this situation, but it was a release of pressure for the moment. And by that, she then starts trying to find other little things that she's grateful for during the day. And it doesn't take the burden away, but it lessens it momentarily through the day. And she can be present with things that she can change and she can control for a moment. But to just sit there and be like, oh, you write 3 things down that you're grateful for today, man, just doesn't feel genuine for her. No. So you're right. I think that is maybe such an important point that we don't talk about enough. It has to be balanced in the complexity of life.
And there's a piece in that I think, I don't know that it's only been mental health has really kind of added this toxic positivity with it, but mental health hasn't helped. And my thought goes to the idea of random acts of kindness.
Same thing. Yeah. Right.
And I'm trying to think back, and as you were sharing that, like, I don't know why, but it sparked there's 2 different things that stand out to me that I've experienced in my life. And I really, when I see an opportunity to do this, I really try to take it. And it's when I see someone having car troubles and like they're by themselves and they're like trying to fumble with a flashlight or something like that, I try to pause and stop as long as I'm able to. And I'm just not going to make, things really challenging myself or my family later on. Like, hey, can I help? Can I help you change a tire? Like, because I remember there was a time, not a tire, but my car's stopped dead in York City in the middle of an intersection. I had no idea what to do. And 2 people showed up. They're like, all right, put it in neutral and we're going to push it. And man, like that, just like it was just like this crisis. I was panicking and they showed up. And like, it's been something that, again, like the gratitude I have for them inspires actions. And it is, I guess, technically a random act of kindness, but it inspires that when I'm there, it's on my radar more so than it would have been beforehand. And similarly, when I can, if it's a snowstorm here that we have in South Central PA, where I'm in a parking lot and I have like a decent snow scraper, I try to go, and especially if there's like individuals parked nearby that I know, or neighbors, I'll go clean their cars off, or I'll go and I'll go and shovel their driveway, or, just at least clear it out for them. So that way I'm like, hey, like, I know how much that's meant to me when I've been in a rush and it's been hard. And it's just like, hey, if I have this time, can I work to share this? And I think, again, I have gratitude for the act of being able to do this, and even just that I have the ability to do that. And then also, I don't know if they're grateful for it or not. That's up for them. But I know for me, I've had gratitude and wanting to share the action that generated that gratitude in a different way. So even again, talking about different ways that we can align our values and taking those little moments. So when you were talking about that snap that she got from her children, it made me think about, like, I wonder if she then just sent a message, or if there's a little bit more intention beyond that. And again, not in that random act of kindness, like performative way, but in a way that touched her and really made things significant for her, and then being able to pass it along.
Yeah. And right. I mean, I think those two are connected really well. And I mean, I think it kind of goes into this, we've kind of talked about, I almost feel like we're saying, I don't want to say goals are bad. I love the goal piece and the intention piece, but I think it's like, there's two different things, right? There's the goals that create this activation. So it's the behavioral activation piece of it. And then there's the intention, which is that values or mindfulness piece of it. And, it's, so using the example with the snap, it's not about her then just creating a goal to snap someone else. It can be it sounds like for your situation, you kind of have a goal that if you have the time, you're going to help other people. But it's about the intention of slowing down in that transition time to be able to reflect on doing it. It's not just, hey, I'm going to just snap somebody else, or I'm going to go scrape somebody else's windows. It's the slowdown that's important. It's that pausing for a second and saying, hey, my car's done, and while it's heating up, I'm going to scrape somebody else's window. And appreciating having that moment. Or in the person I had mentioned's case, pausing for a second and say, man, that felt good to me. I want that to feel good to somebody else. And I'm going to reciprocate that back. That's where it gets important. It's slowing it down. It's thinking it through. And if we pause and think about it, it's where it becomes so meaningful.
And I think it can be such a challenging thing. And in some ways, if we make pausing the goal, not that it's necessarily lost, but I do think it can feel like it's like, okay, I'm pausing. Okay, now it's more so, how do we build awareness to pause? Yeah. And so how do we kind of open ourselves up to the recognizing what is a moment that I can pull significance from? And I think when we can do that, we can recognize, one, that there's so many different things that we can be, pull that significance or gratitude from. But it takes that taking the time to be aware, but the perception and the awareness to recognize the opportunity as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like I was thinking, like, in my head, like how what's the self-talk kind of around some of this stuff. And I kind of was like thinking, so I'm going to use the Snapchat example because that's the one I was thinking through as you were talking. And I'm like, the way I think we appreciate that pause is kind of having this dialogue in our head that it's like something like, my intention is to cultivate connection with other people. And my goal is to practice it by snapping somebody else who means something to me when someone snaps me and makes me feel that way or something. That's maybe a long-winded way of saying it. But this idea that, like, maybe that's the talk we have to have in our head, is that we start with the intention and then we decide what the goal is to reach that intention. It's, I think if we frame things like that, that creates the pause for us.
Yeah. And it gives us opportunity to then capitalize. And I also want to I don't know that we always need to capitalize. But I do think if we don't ever give ourselves that opportunity, then we're missing out on some really significant and meaningful moments. And even the term savoring comes to mind, like the idea of like when we can like really take in, the sensory experience of a moment. How do, we can savor that moment. And I think that can build gratitude. And like, I know personally, I've had my favorite meal and I've just been talking and I've been in a rush and it's just like, it's good. It tastes great.
Right.
But when I think back and it's like, if someone asks me, hey, what's your favorite dish? I'm thinking back to those moments where I've savored that. Yeah. Where it was really like, just like, the texture, the different, the aroma, like just the temperature, like, just like it was the experience of having this meal. That's what stands out when like, so I think it also gives us that experience to also reflect back and identify, like, going back to at least that car example, when I pause to see if I can help, like it brings me back to that moment. It brings me back. So I think it like when we're savoring those moments, it gives us that opportunity to kind of time travel and jump back and like experience gratitude in a whole other way as well.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to be said about slowing down, right? I mean, I think that's in general, it does, it's again, I kind of use my travel here for an example. I used to travel and I used to just rush to get through airports and get on planes and get off planes and rush to a hotel. And it was just so chaotic. And, and it was funny because my wife was traveling with me recently and I think part of it drives her crazy, but like I take my time, like I go through the airport, I stop and get coffee. I sit and drink my coffee at a table before I go to my gate. And she's like, you are not in a hurry. And I'm like, no, like I just want the moment. Like, I just want to take a second. And like, the plane's not leaving any faster if I rush to it or if I take a moment and just kind of sit here and kind of think through my trip a little bit. And it was funny because I think it was so interesting because it was a challenge for her to travel like that. Like it was like, because she was kind of like, let's get to the gate. And I'm like, my wait time is going to be the same there than if I sit here and grab a cup of coffee and enjoy my coffee and just take the day. And when I get there, the plane's still leaving at the same time. But by doing that, it's made me appreciate my travel more. Like, it was like, and traveling a lot lately, it's just been like, and it sounds simple. It's not like I'm having this luxurious cup of coffee at the airport. It's 90% of the time Starbucks because that's what's there. But it's still okay to take the time to just enjoy it. And that is where I think my gratitude then comes in more. And it's like, I appreciate my travel differently now because I'm not rushing to just get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And that thing that we ourselves as clinicians, as well as those that we're working with, like being able to like call that out, like, and again, I don't think it's something that we can practice in every single moment. However, when there's opportunities, let's take them. Let's make sure that we can pause and we can experience. And, I like to, if ever a client tells me that they're going on vacation, I like to be like, okay, hey, like the vacation can feel like it flies by in just a moment. Make sure you stop and you capture some, like make sure like you really kind of pause and like soak it in because it can be like, day by day by day. Okay, it's over, back into the reality or back into the routine. And it's like, can feel like it just flew by. But if we can really pause and draw out those moments, wow, we can get a lot more significance. And again, I think it can take up a lot more space in a really positive way.
Yeah. And and I think going back to that idea that we can be grateful in the moment, and the more moments that we pause and we are grateful for, the more it then creates a stable tendency of gratitude. Like there's this accumulation effect that happens, but we just have to sometimes just pause for a moment, and it becomes then much easier to recognize when we do that. Which I think is important. So
Yeah.
as we're kind of like wrapping up here, one of the thoughts that I had was like, what's an exercise or something that we can have people do to kind of reflect on kind of their experiences to kind of enhance gratitude, whether if we're talking a holiday season or whether we're just talking about just in general, and so like something I don't know where I got this from, but at some point I heard someone mention this idea of 3 breaths of gratitude, and this idea that on breath 1, we kind of reflect gratitude for someone who supported us, whether it be over the year or recently. I mean, I think you can frame it any way you want, but let's just say the year, since we're kind of in the holiday mood here. So breath 1, gratitude for someone who supported you. Breath 2, gratitude for something that challenged you. So it was a challenge, but you also grew from it. And breath 3, gratitude for yourself. What's something that you showed up for, even if it wasn't a perfect scenario? Kind of what we were saying with the maybe you only wrote 2 out of 3 letters, but they were 2 really great letters. Like, that's showing up for something. So this idea of 3 breaths of gratitude for someone, for something, and for ourselves. So if you think about that, Paul, do you have like, what comes to mind? Is there things that come to mind for you? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
But
I mean, when you're talking about the individuals that support, like truly the first person, and they probably take up the most space is my wife, and ways I can't describe, in ways, with things that I'm probably not even aware of, like just without her, I don't think I'm as an effective clinician. I wouldn't get to be the stepfather that I love to be. I wouldn't be, there would be all these pieces that I think wouldn't be there. And I think she would always, be my number one answer there. So I'm trying to also go beyond that as well. And like, I would also say my parents, and I have I don't have constant, my parents aren't super local, so I don't get a chance to really interact with them constantly here. And so getting those little moments. And so I've taken to setting goals with being able to, my dad lives down in Florida. So I've been setting a goal of once a month. My dad and I have a scheduled call. He's where I've got my ADHD from. So we have to schedule it, or else like if we're like both just like, hey, we got to get together, we got to call. It just doesn't happen. So like we've actually this year, been doing that more. And it's been so cool to hear it, like just hear what's going on in a bit more of a day to day versus this longer gap. And then, for my mother, again, like I just called out that pride, but also just the awareness and the presence to even reach out in that moment. And I know that that's a bit momentarily, but just those come at unexpected moments. And it's just kind of like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. And just like that almost kind of in that Snapchat reaching out kind of way, it's like, just can hold so much significance. And so, maybe some very traditional, but like, my wife and my parents are that support, for the challenge piece. Truly, I think I was kind of mentioned this to you earlier, Ray, and I just shared that had this presentation, and it was the kind of the next step for me, going from the podcast and going, and then giving a presentation where instead of me having a banter or a conversation, it's just me talking for an hour, and that felt so intimidating in my social anxiety and my, like the anxiety surrounding like giving presentations or public speaking came up. And it was something I was really grateful that I had the opportunity to go and experience. And from the practicing and everything, it went really well. And I'm also then grateful, I guess, that experience of like pulling away from that. So even like that I took that opportunity. So I guess my 2 and my 3 might be kind of relating to the same answer there, but like taking on the challenge of, I guess, that self-growth and like something that I've throughout the majority of my life dreaded. And now, I gave a presentation in front of, over 500 people. And I was like, whoa, that is really cool. And good job to me for having the resilience and like taking that opportunity, because a few years ago that would have been, I would have scoffed and been like, yeah, right. That's never going to happen. Like that's, and now here I am. And like that sense of growth that I can acknowledge for myself. So, I think I answered the three, but I'm curious, how about you, for you, Ray? Like
it's interesting, like I think all this stuff happens right at a phase of life. And so for me, it's interesting. So this year, my support person or persons would actually, I'm going to actually say my parents too, which is kind of an interesting switch for me, like in the sense that I probably over past years probably wouldn't have gone there. But for this year, it's been really an interesting part because I get to spend time as my parents have moved closer to me. I've gotten to spend time weekly with them and talk about things we never really have, my career stuff or just doing little things with them. And as challenges in my life happen, them being here. So I lived away from my parents for 25 years now. And then all of a sudden they're now 20 minutes away from me. And not all of a sudden, but over the last couple of years. And so this year, I have a different gratitude for my relationship there, which has been interesting. Yeah, I think for the challenge for me is going to sound really odd, but the challenge for me has been this idea of slowing down and appreciating the moment, and taking the opportunities I have because of the work I do to not just travel and run into a city and run out of a city, but to spend a day there, to appreciate the surrounding, that I'm not going and presenting and just seeing hotels, that I'm actually getting to be places and kind of enjoy the time there, which is really it has been a challenge for me, believe it or not. Like I'm used to, I've had times where I've, it's a constant go. So the pause has been a challenge, but it's made me really appreciate life so differently. And, for myself, I think that, again, it maybe seems simple and, but showing up for connection, that when I am with people, that even if it's, maybe not a perfect interaction, being able to just show up for the connection with other people and the reconnection with people. So for me, like all of them do kind of tie together in that, but it's been interesting. I have never enjoyed what I do more because of little adjustments that have happened. So, it shouldn't be a challenge to pause, but sometimes it's a challenge to pause. Being, again, feeling like, okay, I'm going to take advantage of my time with people and use that as really a positive, where I'm going to really be there. It's just been a breath of fresh air. It's made a really interesting year for me in a really good way. So, wow. So I guess for listeners, I mean, I hope maybe you do the 3 breaths of gratitude as you're driving and listening and kind of think. I mean, it's funny. I think just watching you, Paul, talk, and I could feel it myself as I say some of this out loud. it does create a good feeling, right? Both of us were kind of smiling when we were talking. I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is, it is such a powerful thing when we use it, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess two more brief thoughts. Like, it is powerful. And I think it's something that finding opportunities to share, expressing gratitude to others and around others. It doesn't even necessarily need to be the expression to the person we're grateful for, but Ray, you're sharing what you're grateful for. And I'm just I'm not experiencing that, but I'm experiencing your experience, and vice versa there. So I think, that can be such a powerful thing. And, just kind of the nature of both of our first breaths here. We don't oftentimes do that. This is more so when we have a guest, but that, what's one piece of media you would recommend? Just as you were sharing there, the song Cats in the Cradle came to mind. And,
right.
So if you have a moment, maybe after you've done your 3 breaths stuff, if you have the opportunity, throw that on, Spotify or Apple Music or whatever platform, because, I think that's a great song that illustrates what can happen when we don't take the time and we don't have the presence. And then we have that recognition too late. And how do we then capitalize on the interactions and give ourselves the permission to experience connections and meaning when there's that availability that's there?
Yeah, love it. And it's a great song. It'll be stuck in my head now the rest of the night. So
you're welcome.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and with that, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but until then, be well, stay psyched.